All right. Let's dive into this one. This is Hussy,
Yeah.
right? A 1980 British drama. So we're going kind of back in time a little bit.
Yeah.
And it looks like it throws us right into the world of the cabaret scene in London. I'm excited to kind of get into this one. We've got a whole stack of reviews here and some background info on the film.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm really curious about, and I think you are too, is Helen Mirren's performance.
Yes.
She's playing Beaty Simons, who's a woman navigating, well, everything. I mean, love, survival, her past. She's got a lot going on. What's your first take on this one?
Well, I think you're right. Mirren's performance is really like the core of the film. It's, it's so easy to fall into those stereotypes, when you're portraying a sex worker. And Mirren brings such a raw, such a captivating presence to Beaty. It's not just her vulnerability. It's that quiet strength, that resilience that she just shines through. You can just see it in her eyes.
Really? Okay. I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah.
I mean, the reviews I've seen use all those words, stand out and powerful, but they don't really dig into how she achieves that effect.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me was how she uses such subtle gestures and expressions to convey Beaty's inner turmoil. There's a scene where, she's on stage, all smiles for the audience, but then just this quick glance, this flicker of pain in her eyes, and you just see the weight of her experiences. I mean, that's where Mirren's brilliance really shines through. She doesn't need those big dramatic outbursts to convey Beaty's depth. She does it with incredible nuance.
Wow. Okay. I'm already picturing that in my head, that scene.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word stereotype. And I wonder, if the film itself avoids those same traps. I mean, the plot summaries I've seen, it sounds like the classic, opposites attract kind of storyline. Beaty meets Emory. He's this sound and lighting technician at the cabaret, and of course, sparks fly. So, I mean, do their characters feel fully fleshed out, or are we just falling into, predictable roles?
I think that's a great question. And honestly, that's one of the film's, weaknesses. I mean, while Mirren delivers this truly multifaceted performance, John Shea as Emory, it feels a bit flat in comparison. He's a decent counterpart, provides a sense of stability and tenderness, but his character just lacks that same depth. So it almost makes you wonder, did the filmmakers intentionally keep him, underdeveloped so they could focus more on Beaty's journey? I don't know.
Yeah. So a missed opportunity there maybe to explore Emory's perspective a bit more. Or maybe it's even a commentary on how society kind of focuses on the fallen woman while the man's story doesn't really get as much scrutiny. But either way, I guess that's something to consider, as we watch it.
Exactly. And, this really ties into like one of the film's major discussion points. Is Hussy a feminist film? There are definitely elements that suggest it is, like you see Beaty's agency and her desire for a better life, but then you have this abusive ex-lover, Alex, who throws a wrench into everything. And then there's Emory's friend Max, who gets him caught up in this shady drug deal. So it's,
It's complicated.
Hold on. Abusive ex-lover, drug deals. This is starting to sound a little less like a straightforward romance. I mean, the plot summaries I've seen make it sound much more, straightforward, like just a romance. But now you're adding like thriller elements, almost like crime drama,
Sure.
And I think that's where the film gets a bit messy, It tries to blend these different genres, and the result is this pacing that feels uneven at times. Like the first half of the film really focuses on Beaty's life, her work, her relationship with Emory. It's character-driven. It's intimate. It draws you into this whole world of the cabaret. And then the second half, it just takes this sharp turn with the introduction of these antagonists, Alex and Max. And then it becomes much more plot-driven. It's relying on these external conflicts to kind of propel the story forward.
Okay, so that explains why some of the reviews mention these pacing issues. It sounds like the film might be trying to do too much at once, juggling this complex character study with like a crime thriller plot. I mean, I'm curious though, even if those thriller elements feel kind of tacked on, how do they impact the film's overall message?
Yeah, well, that's where the debate gets really interesting, because some people argue that the introduction of these manipulative men, ultimately it reinforces those, harmful stereotypes about sex work. It kind of suggests that Beaty needs rescuing, that she can't escape her past without a man's intervention.
But couldn't you argue that those antagonists serve to highlight the very real dangers that women in Beaty's profession often face? I mean, it's not like the film's shying away from, the gritty realities of her life. both inside and outside of the cabaret.
You're absolutely right. That's a valid point. And that's what makes Hussy such a fascinating film to unpack. It presents these complex issues, but it doesn't offer any easy answers. It just forces you to grapple with the nuances of these characters' lives and the choices that they make.
It's interesting, though, how even with all these criticisms about like the pacing and the plot, a lot of the reviews still praise the film's atmosphere.
Right.
They talk about the gritty realism of the setting, the way it captures those sights and sounds of 1970s London.
Yeah, and I think that's where director Matthew Chapman's skill really shines through. He uses the setting to create the stark contrast between the glamorous facade of the cabaret and then the harsh realities of Beaty's life outside those, glittering walls.
Yeah.
You see those smoky, dimly lit streets, and you hear those echoes of music and laughter spilling out of nightclubs. And you feel the pulse of a city that's both alluring and dangerous.
Yeah.
It's not just a backdrop, it's like a character in itself.
I see what you're saying.
Reflecting the complexities of the story.
As you're describing that, I'm thinking about, I remember one of the reviews mentioned that the film is kind of like a time capsule, preserving a specific moment in London's history.
Right.
Do you think that's part of its appeal, even for viewers today?
Absolutely. I mean, even if you're not familiar with the London of that era, the film just immerses you in that world.
Yeah.
The fashion, the music, the social dynamics, it all just adds this layer of authenticity that just draws you in. And it reminds us that even though times change, those core themes of the film, love, loss, the search for identity, those are timeless.
Okay, so we've talked about the setting, we've talked about these performances, the plot twists, we've even touched on the whole feminist debate surrounding this film. But what about the audience response? I mean, you mentioned earlier that there seems to be this disconnect between what the critics were saying and how viewers reacted to the film.
Yeah, that's right. While many critics kind of pointed out those flaws, the uneven pacing, the somewhat underdeveloped male characters, audiences seemed to connect with the film on this much more emotional level.
Really?
They praised Mirren's performance, the film's rawness. It's this unflinching portrayal of a woman trying to break free from the constraints of her past.
So maybe the film's flaws, I don't know, maybe they're part of the appeal? Like it's not this, polished, predictable Hollywood production. It feels a little rough around the edges,
Yeah.
But that rawness is what makes it resonate.
Yeah.
I think you've hit on something really important there.
Okay.
Because in a world of slick, formulaic films, Hussy dares to be different.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from those difficult topics.
Right.
And it doesn't try to tie everything up in a neat little bow.
Right.
And maybe that's what audiences respond to.
Yeah.
They see a reflection of their own struggles, their own messy lives, and they find a sense of connection in that shared humanity.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how this all relates to you, like as a viewer. What were your initial expectations going into this? I mean, has our conversation changed your perspective on the film at all?
I have to admit, I went in with some preconceived notions.
Yeah.
I knew Helen Mirren was in it, so I expected a strong performance.
Of course.
Which she definitely delivered.
Yeah.
But I also thought the film might be a bit too melodramatic, a bit dated for my taste.
Let's see.
But as we've been discussing it, I've realized there's a lot more to Hussy than meets the eye.
Right.
The way it captures that specific moment in time, the way it explores these universal themes without offering any easy answers.
Yeah.
That's what makes it relevant even today.
I'm with you on that. And I think it's a testament to the power of film, right?
Yeah.
Even a film made over 40 years ago with its, imperfections and its quirks can still spark these kinds of conversations and challenge us to think about things in new ways.
And that's what's so exciting about this deep dive format.
Yeah.
It's not just about summarizing information. It's about digging deeper, exploring different perspectives, and finding those unexpected nuggets of insight.
Speaking of unexpected nuggets, did anything in particular stand out to you in the reviews or the background information?
One thing that struck me was the recurring theme of duality in the film.
Duality?
Yeah. You have the contrast between the glamorous cabaret and the gritty streets of London, the duality of Beaty's life as both a performer and a sex worker, and even those conflicting interpretations of the film's message.
Yeah.
It's as if the film itself is a reflection of this duality.
Interesting.
Embracing both light and darkness, beauty and ugliness, without judgment.
And how do you think that plays out in the film's ending? I mean, does Hussy offer any kind of resolution, or does it leave us with more questions than answers?
Well, I don't want to spoil the ending for our listener,
Like, of course.
but I will say that it's both satisfying and unsettling.
Okay.
It offers a glimpse of hope for Beaty, a chance at a new beginning, but it also acknowledges those lingering shadows of her past.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that ambiguity is what makes the film so powerful.
Okay.
It doesn't offer a neat, tidy conclusion.
Right.
It leaves you pondering the complexities of Beaty's life and the choices that she's made.
That ambiguity, that open-endedness, that's what makes us want to discuss it. It makes us consider those different interpretations,
Right.
wrestle with those themes, and maybe even reflect on our own lives and the choices that we make.
I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Hussy is not a film that spoon-feeds you. It's a film that invites you to participate in the conversation, to engage with its complexities, and to draw your own conclusions.
Yeah.
And isn't that what makes for a truly enriching cinematic experience?
As we've been kind of dissecting this film, Hussy, I keep coming back to Helen Mirren's performance. I mean, it's clear that she poured her heart and soul into this role, and it just makes me realize that even a flawed film can be elevated by a truly captivating performance.
It's true. Mirren's performance is like a masterclass in subtle acting. She brings so much humanity and depth to a character that, could have so easily just fallen into stereotype, So I think as you watch Hussy, pay attention to Mirren's facial expressions, her body language, the way she even uses silence to convey Beaty's, inner turmoil. It's the kind of performance that just stays with you long after the credits roll.
And what I think is also fascinating is how Hussy gives us a window into a world that's not often seen. Like this gritty and vibrant London cabaret scene and the lives of these, characters kind of on the fringes of society. It's something you don't see very often, at least not portrayed with this much authenticity.
And while the film is rooted in this specific time and place, 1970s London, those themes that it explores, love, loss, yearning for redemption. I mean, those resonate across generations and cultures. It's a reminder that no matter how much the world changes, certain aspects of the human experience, they just remain timeless.
Yeah, and I'm also struck by just how willing the film is to tackle difficult subjects head on.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the complexities of sex work and the power dynamics between men and women and even, the lasting impacts of trauma and abuse.
And it does all that without, passing judgment on its characters.
Yeah, right.
Hussy presents these issues with a real sense of empathy and understanding, and it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society that we live in.
So we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Hussy.
Yeah.
We've talked about the film's strengths, Mirren's performance and the evocative setting, the unflinching portrayal of these complex characters. But we've also acknowledged its weaknesses, the uneven pacing, the underdeveloped male characters, the blending of genres that sometimes just doesn't quite work.
And I think that's what makes this film so interesting to discuss. It's not a perfect film, but it is a film that stays with you.
Yeah.
It provokes thought and sparks debate. And ultimately, it leaves you with more questions than answers.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to ponder as you go and watch Hussy. Does Beaty truly find agency by the film's end? Or is her happy ending actually just, a reinforcement of societal expectations for women? It's kind of a tough question.
It's a question that really does linger long after that final scene. Does Beaty truly break free from her past? Or does she simply trade one form of dependence for another? We really encourage you to watch this film and keep that question in mind and draw your own conclusions.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive, and I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of Hussy, its complexities, and just the enduring power of film to, challenge our perspectives and spark meaningful conversations.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your journey into the world of Hussy. There's so much more to uncover, to analyze, and to appreciate.
Yeah. So go forth and experience the film for yourself.
Happy watching. Happy watching.